The sun had barely crested over the horizon at Fort Glenwood, but the base was already alive with motion. Helicopter blades thumped through the cold dawn air, and cadets jogged in cadence along the concrete trails. Behind the hum of engines and drill commands, another sound echoed softly, the quiet squeak of a mop. Raymond Ellis, a janitor pushing 70, moved carefully down the hallway outside the International Operations Center. His blue uniform bore a stitched name tag, faded at the edges, but still legible. No rank, no medals. Just Raymond, a man forgotten by most and noticed by few. He swept the same floor every morning. He emptied the same bins, wiped the same windows. Always out of the way, never asking for anything. No one ever asked what Raymond had done before picking up a mop. They saw gray hair, tired eyes, and worn boots, and assumed the story ended there. But that morning, something happened that turned everything upside down. Inside the simulation room, a high-level, multilingual military drill was underway. The brass had flown in from 5 NATO-aligned countries: Germany, France, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. The mission was a hostage rescue simulation. Language coordination, cultural cues, and rapid translation were essential. It was a test of the new AI-assisted command system. Generals and officers huddled over maps and screens. Dozens of interpreters monitored incoming feeds. Everything was running smoothly until it wasn't. A sharp command came in Arabic through the speakers. The system translated it in real time, advance. But something was wrong. The Saudi liaison officer stiffened. He shook his head slowly. "That's not what he said," he muttered, too quietly at first. Confusion spread among the command team. The AI insisted the order was advance, but the soldiers on screen were hesitating. They weren't moving then. A firm voice echoed from the hallway. "It means hold position, not advance." Silence fell like a curtain. Heads turned. Standing at the doorway, mop still in hand, was Raymond Ellis, the janitor. His eyes fixed on the screen. The room full of colonels, interpreters, and tech specialists didn't know what to say. General Howard Maddox, commander of the base, looked toward the voice and narrowed his eyes. "Excuse me," he said slowly. "How do you know that?" Raymond stepped into the room. He looked awkward, out of place, but his voice remained calm. "I spent 28 years in military intelligence, sir. That dialect Naidi Arabic, it's common in central Saudi regions. That phrase has nuance. It doesn't mean advance. It means hold the line until further notice. A mistranslation like that in the field could get someone killed." Whispers rippled across the room. General Maddox studied Raymond, his sharp instincts picking up something the others had missed. There was weight in Raymond's words. A kind of confidence that didn't come from guessing. It came from knowing. "You were intelligence." "Yes, sir. Sergeant First Class, retired 2011. Served in Iraq, Turkey, Jordan, and Qatar. My last post was language operations in the CENTCOM theater." "Then what are you doing mopping floors?" the general asked. Raymond gave a tired smile. "Bills." There was a beat of silence. Then slowly, General Maddox walked over and extended his hand. "I think we've been wasting some serious talent." Raymond hesitated for half a second, then shook it. The mop leaned forgotten against the wall. What followed next was something the entire base would talk about for weeks. Raymond was invited to assist with the remainder of the simulation as the tech team scrambled to verify his correction. Pointed out 3 more critical translation errors, subtle nuances that no AI system or junior interpreter had caught. French idiomatic commands misinterpreted. A Turkish term mistranslated as aggressive when it was intended to de-escalate in under an hour. The simulation was back on track, and for the first time in years, Raymond didn't feel like a ghost. Later that afternoon, General Maddox called him into his office. The room was lined with commendations, maps, and polished medals, a stark contrast to the janitorial closet where Raymond had stored his supplies. The general gestured to a chair. "Take a seat, Sergeant. I'm just Raymond now, sir. Not after today, you're not." Maddox opened a file folder on his desk. "I pulled your records. For commendations for excellence in field linguistics, 2 presidential citations for your translation work during Operation Northern Watch. You worked with 6 languages, across 7 deployments, and no one here had any idea." Raymond lowered his eyes. That was a long time ago. Maddox didn't. He leaned forward. I want you to join tomorrow's wargame session. NATO Joint Task Force 12 country involvement. We've had issues with accurate command relays. You'd be a huge asset. Raymond blinked. Sir, I have a janitorial shift tomorrow. Forget that shift. Starting now, you're a temporary linguistics advisor. Full access. $600 a day. Raymond's mouth opened, then closed. General, that's more than I made in 2 weeks. Maddox smiled. Then I suggest you get a good night's rest. You've got a lot of lives to help tomorrow. As Raymond stepped out of the office that evening, he glanced toward the maintenance wing. His cart was still there, his mop quietly leaning against the wall. He looked at it, then looked ahead. For the first time in a long time, someone had looked past his uniform and seen the man underneath. And tomorrow, the entire base would too. Raymond Ellis stood quietly near the corner of the operations center, dressed in a simple white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, borrowed slacks slightly too big around the waist. He had nothing flashy, no rank insignia, no polished shoes, but the room, filled with decorated officers and international observers, gave him space, not out of pity, but out of curiosity. Word had already spread across Fort Glenwood, the janitor. Others whispered, but General Maddox had made the call, and nobody questioned the general. 12 countries were represented in this wargame simulation, each operating under high-pressure conditions, mimicking a hostage crisis in foreign terrain. The goal? Real multilingual coordination across troops, drones, and base command. The last exercise had been riddled with translation errors, delays, confused orders, botched timelines. Today, Raymond would stand behind the translation team and monitor communications in 7 different languages. The moment the drill began, he was already listening, not just to words, but to meaning. The kind of nuance only someone with battlefield experience could recognize. 20 minutes in, a phrase in Polish caused hesitation on the American side. Raymond leaned forward and corrected it. That word doesn't mean retreat. It means fall back into defensive arc. Tell Bravo team to shift, not flee. Officers blinked. He was right. Then it was a French command misread as detain, when it actually meant secure for transport, a critical distinction. One by one, Raymond intercepted the mistakes before they could snowball. No hesitation, no notes. His mind worked like a military-grade processor, cross-referencing dialects, command structures, and cultural context in real-time. Colonel Latour from France approached him mid-exercise. You have a natural ear, he said in French. Raymond smiled, replying fluently. Comes from listening when no one thinks you are. By noon, it was undeniable. The simulation that had nearly failed the week before was now running seamlessly. At the break, officers from Germany, Italy, and Turkey approached Raymond not with suspicion, but with admiration. You should be leading this, one of them said. But Raymond just shrugged. I'm here to support, not to command. General Maddox watched it all from the side, arms crossed, nodding slowly. When the day ended, the team gathered in the debriefing room. Maddox stood before them all. This was the smoothest multinational simulation Fort Glenwood has seen in over 5 years, he began, and the credit goes to someone who wasn't even on the roster until yesterday. He turned toward Raymond, Sergeant Raymond Ellis. Your insight saved this exercise from collapse. Your understanding of not just language, but of intent, is beyond what any algorithm or fresh-faced interpreter could offer. You didn't just catch errors, you prevented conflict. Raymond shifted in his chair, uncomfortable in the spotlight. Just doing my job, sir. No, Maddox implied. You did more than your job. You reminded this entire room what experience looks like, what value sounds like. A murmur of applause spread around the room, not loud, but sincere. The next morning, Raymond walked into the base as usual, but something had changed. His ID badge had been upgraded, his name had been added to the official roster, and outside the linguistics division, a new sign had been bolted to the door. Strategic Language Consultant SGT Raymond Ellis. He stood for a moment, staring at it, not because he wanted recognition, but because he never thought he'd see his name on a door again. Slowly, inside, a modest office had been set up. A desk, a laptop, 7 language dictionaries stacked neatly on one side, a coat rack, a chair, and in the corner, quietly folded and set aside, his old blue janitor's uniform. Raymond stood there for a long time before pulling out the chair. He had gone from cleaning dust off the floors to wiping off years of doubt, but not everyone welcomed the change. Down the hall, Lieutenant Harris, a career officer with 2 degrees in international relations, watched with narrowed eyes. "This is absurd," he muttered to his colleague. "Guy doesn't even have recent certifications." "What? He waves a mop one day and gets a title the next." Colonel Jenna Price overheard and walked over. "You have a problem, Lieutenant." Harris hesitated. "I just think it sets a bad precedent." Price didn't blink. "The only precedent it sets is that real-world knowledge matters. He did in 1 day what your team couldn't do in 3 weeks." Harris said nothing more. Still, Raymond noticed the tension at his first team meeting. A young translator named Sarah Mendoza, fresh out of a language program, asked skeptically, with respect, "Sir, when's the last time you worked in an actual linguistic operations unit?" Raymond answered gently. "I was deployed in Turkey in 2004, in a mission where mistranslating a single Kurdish term could have cost us an entire village." He paused. "Experience doesn't come with a date stamp. It comes with scars." The room went quiet. Sarah later found him in the hallway. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to sound." Raymond smiled. "You asked the right question. That's how we all learn." By the end of the week, Raymond had reviewed over 40 communication protocols used across Joint Task Force simulations. He marked inconsistencies in Spanish-Castilian phrasing, fixed outdated Russian military terminologies, and flagged over a dozen English to Arabic transitions that, while technically correct, were culturally risky in negotiation contexts. Word traveled quickly by the second week. He was asked to give a briefing at Fort Lejeune by the third. His analysis was requested for a Pentagon simulation drill involving allies from the Pacific region. But even with the recognition, Raymond never let it go to his head. He still had lunch with the janitorial crew, still parked in the far corner lot, still signed his name the same way, SGTR Ellis. Ret. He wasn't interested in titles, only in making sure no one else felt invisible the way he once had. Then came the real test. A diplomatic incident in Hungary involving joint U.S.-German forces and a misinterpreted military drill nearly led to an international fallout. The Secretary of Defense called General Maddox directly. "We need your language guy," he said. "The janitor." Raymond was flown out within hours, and what happened there would shake the foundation of how the military viewed its Veerman. Stepped onto Hungarian soil just before midnight. The tarmac at Papa Air Base was slick with rain. Despite the late hour, a military vehicle waited for him, engine idling, headlights cutting through the fog. A young American lieutenant saluted sharply as Raymond climbed in. "Sergeant Ellis?" "Sir, we're glad you're here. It's gotten complicated." Raymond nodded. He had no briefcase, no assistant, just a small duffel and a notepad worn from years of scribbled translations and phrases. The air was thick with tension. 2 nights earlier, during a joint military drill, a miscommunicated order had caused German troops to move into a restricted training zone. The Americans, believing it a breach, raised alerts. Accusations flew. Within hours, top-level German and U.S. officials were exchanging diplomatic fire, not bullets, but words sharp enough to fracture alliances. By the time Raymond arrived, communications between the forces had been reduced to formal memos, every word triple-checked and still misread. One side blamed the translation system, the other blamed deliberate disrespect. But Raymond didn't see a political standoff. He saw a classic failure of cultural nuance in the command center. He was greeted by Colonel Richter of the Bundeswehr and Colonel Mallory of the U.S. 14th Tactical. Both men, hardened and proud, barely nodded at each other. Their troops, once working side by side, now stood on opposite ends of the base like rival camps. Raymond broke the ice with a question. "Colonels, may I ask what the disputed command was?" Richter replied stiffly. "The Americans claimed our phrase Stellen sichern meant to seize territory. But it doesn't. It means to secure a position to ensure it's stable. It was defensive, not aggressive." Mallory cut in. "That's not how our guys saw it. The translation came through as, take control of the field. They thought you were moving to dominate the zone." Raymond took a breath. "Gentlemen, you're both right and both wrong." He walked to the map on the wall and pointed. In German military structure, sichern is used with precision, but in English, the word secure can mean both to guard and to capture, depending on tone and context. The algorithm didn't misfire, it simply chose the wrong nuance. The colonels stared at him. It wasn't sabotage, it was semantics. And, just like that, the air shifted. Over the next 2 hours, Raymond hosted a joint meeting, not as a commander, not as a mediator, but as a translator of intent. He listened, clarified, humanized. He explained that language wasn't just about words. It was about history, about emotion, about trust. So when Colonel Richter said position, he meant safety. When Colonel Mallory heard control, he heard escalation. They were speaking the same language. They just didn't realize it. By dawn, both sides had agreed to resume drills. A new communication protocol, co-authored by Raymond that night, would be implemented across all NATO joint exercises moving forward. It would be called the Ellis Protocol, a living document guiding militaries on the complexities of high-stakes multilingual operations. When Raymond returned to Fort Glenwood a week later, he was met not with fanfare, but with purpose, a message. From the Pentagon awaited him. They wanted him to head a new initiative, Veteran Strategic Integration Command, VSIC, a program designed to locate and reintegrate highly skilled retired military personnel who had been overlooked. Men and women with decades of experience, who were now working as janitors, truck drivers, warehouse clerks, ghosts of service. Forgotten by the system they once upheld, Raymond took the offer, but only under one condition: that he be allowed to personally choose the team. He reached out to veterans he'd once served with, translators who'd left the field, cultural advisors who had retired too early. Within 2 months, the team was operational. Their first success, reassigning a 64-year-old former Navy cryptolinguist who had been driving a city bus. The man decoded an intercepted signal that saved a convoy in Djibouti 2 weeks later. Their second, a retired Afghan-American interpreter who helped repair fragile diplomatic relations during a tense refugee intake meeting in Qatar. Word spread. Bases started requesting VSIC consultants before deploying. What had begun with a mop and a mistranslated phrase was now policy. At Fort Glenwood, Raymond kept his old office. On the wall, framed beside his military medals, hung his faded blue janitor's uniform, a quiet reminder of the years no one asked what he used to be. Younger officers, like Sarah Mendoza and even Lieutenant Harris, had come around. They asked questions, sought mentorship, and when a new recruit once dismissed the need for old-school translation methods, Sarah corrected him gently: "That man doesn't translate words. He translates worlds." 5 years later, Raymond stood on a podium once more. The Secretary of Defense pinned the Distinguished Service Civilian Medal on his chest, the highest honor given to a non-active duty American. Thousands stood in silent recognition. But when he stepped up to the microphone, he didn't talk about awards or diplomacy or even languages. He talked about a mop. "I didn't expect anyone to notice me that day. I didn't come to change a system. I just came to work. But I saw something that could have hurt people, and I spoke up. That's all it takes. One moment of clarity, one act of courage, whether you're in uniform or not." His voice wavered slightly. And if you're listening to this, and you're a veteran feeling invisible, hear me now. You are not forgotten. You are not finished. You are not less. You are just waiting for someone to see past your uniform. Crowd erupted. Behind him stood General Maddox, now retired, nodding with pride, and in the audience. Hundreds of veterans placed by VSIC, janitors, mechanics, warehouse workers, all now leaders, advisors, consultants. They didn't wear suits or ribbons. They wore dignity, and that was worth more than any rank. As Raymond stepped down from the stage, a young cadet stopped him and asked, "Sir, how did you learn all those?" "Languages," Raymond chuckled. "Same way you learn anything important, one word at a time. And by listening, especially when no one expects you to." He walked away slowly, his shadow long against the tarmac, not forgotten, not invisible, not done, because some of the strongest voices in history are the ones no one saw coming. Et era NS, and lead to something far greater than a job title. If this story moved you, Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more stories that reveal the quiet heroes among us.